Hello, good afternoon, students. Dr. Samuel Johnson could be regarded one of the most important pillar of the of the periods of transition or the age of transition. So he was famous for his literary works that have been written during the periods of the second half of the 18th century. Definitely the age of post-Augustan, or sometimes we call it the age of a transition, or the age of Samuel Johnson, that have been taken from the name of the most famous poets. So we are going to give this lecture that concerns Dr. Samuel Johnson, the poetry of Samuel Johnson, and specifically we are going to deliver the lecture about his most famous poem, London. London is an imitation of the third satire of Juvenal, and we are going to focus on the point, or the second point, that the third satire of Juvenal, then to the poem London, and which includes some parts just like the introduction, summary, the poem, forms and devices that have been used by Samuel Johnson in the poem of London, the themes that he manipulated for his reader, as well as the meanings of this poem. So we're gonna start in the beginning with the first section of the poem, that is the poetry of Samuel Johnson. So the works and the life of Samuel Johnson specifically started in London. Johnson attempted to support himself with his pen. Essays for gentleman magazines, and works on his a tragedy, Irene, in 1749. Johnson was living apart from his wife during this period, and the marriage, which was a very odd one to begin with, was never the same. Johnson wrote one of his better poems in 1738, which is London. London, a poem in imitation of the third satire of Juvenal. The poem is filled with horrifying descriptions of daily life in London, and it provides a picture of the type of the life of life Johnson was then living. By the way, Johnson met Richard Savage in 1738, and the two of them wandered the streets living a hand-to-mouth existence. Savage was a poet, and he claimed to be the illegitimate son of the Countess of Mansfield. The moral Johnson and the moral Savage made a strange pair, but Johnson had a close attachment to Savage, as is evidenced in an account of the life of Mr. Richard Savage, which Johnson published anonymously in 1744. Again, Johnson was able to bring his wife Titty to London in 1737, but he was still making a precarious living doing the journalism that Cub Street demanded. One of the most interesting examples of that type of writing was Johnson's reporting, or more accurately creating the parliamentary debates. He did not attend the debates in Parliament, but learned the order of the speakers and the positions they took, and then wrote them up in his very noticeable style. In 1747, Johnson published the plan of a dictionary of the English language. He intended to to complete this monumental project in 3 years. And although it took 8 years, it remains one of the most impressive scholarly accomplishments of modern times. In contrast to Johnson's 8 years, it took the 40 members of the French Academy 40 years to complete their dictionary. When Johnson's A Dictionary of the English Language was published in 1755, it was greeted with the critical praise and expression of national pride. Johnson's reputation was established, and he could find some relief from the demands of corrupt street journalism. His financial circumstances began to improve once the dictionary project was supported by a group of booksellers. The English dictionary was written with little assistance of the learned and without any patronage of the great. Not in the soft obscurities of retirement or under the shelters of academic powers, but amidst convenience and distraction in sickness and sorrow. In 1749, this is the points that you are focusing on. In 1749, Johnson published his finest poem, The Vanity of Human Wishes, which is the 10th satire of Juvenal imitated in this poem, which, like London, or it is similar to the poem London, was based on one of Juvenal's satires, but unlike London, which attacks the vices of the city, the vanity of human wishes indicts all vain human desires. The poem is an inventory of those wishes and signals out such aspects of man's life as a power, military glory, of the life of the scholars and the poets. It includes with a terrifying questions, or it's concluded with a terrifying question: must helpless man in ignorance sedate? So this is the end of this poem that is so much gloomy, and it indicates the terrifying atmosphere of the poem. In 1750 and 52, definitely, Johnson wrote 100 of essays for his journal, the Rambler. The essays were not in the manner of the light and personal essays that had been written earlier by Joseph Addison and Richard Steele for The Spectator. Instead, Johnson wrote on moral issues with a more instant and impersonal style. A later venture into the same periodical writing, The Idler, in the vein of Addison and Steele, was not as successful, since it went against the Johnsonian grain. In 1759, this is in 1759, Johnson published his small masterpiece, Rasselas, Prince of Abyssinia. Rasselas is a very similar to a fairy tale. The little character leaves the happy valley to find happiness. On this quest, Rasselas and his companion find not happiness but those vain a human desire. Johnson exposed the vanity of human wishes. Political power, learning, poetry, and the social world of pleasure are all found to be lacking in the capacity to bring happiness. In 1765, this is the last point of this page, Johnson's last a great work, the long delayed one, which is The Plays of William Shakespeare, was published. The textual editing of the plays has been superseded, but Johnson's own comments on specific plays and his preface are still discussed by Shakespearean scholars. The preface is especially important in its rejection of the neoclassical unities of time, place, and action. Johnson rejected the unities of the time and space with typical common sense. His insistence on describing Shakespeare as a playwright whose works were taken from life rather than art, and on the pleasure the audience receives from a Shakespearean play, remains refreshing and illuminating. He did not blindly worship Shakespeare. In fact, he criticized Shakespeare's excessive use of puns and his sometimes declamatory language. The last period of Johnson's life is marked by the friends he met and talked with, especially the Rasselas and James Boswell. Henry Rasselas was a prosperous brewer, and his wife, Hester, had an interest in literature. They invited Johnson to stay at their country home and saved him from one of his periodic depressions. And the last in 1763, what happens is the famous meeting between Johnson and Boswell occurred. Boswell, the son of a Scottish laird, was a law student with an interest in literature. His relationship with Johnson was curious. Johnson was always teasing Boswell about being a Scot and about being naive. Johnson also became a moral guide and confessor to Boswell. He patiently listened to tales of Boswell's romantic liaison or doubts about religion and reassured him. Boswell's The Life of Samuel Johnson in 1791 is a remarkable rendering of a man's personality and thoughts, having earned for Boswell his own place in the history of letters. The reader of Boswell's biography comes away with a sense of a legendary man as a living being. This is, in short, the works and the life of Samuel Johnson. The second part of this lecture is the third satire of Juvenal, that is imitated in the famous poem by Samuel Johnson, London. So that satire Juvenal is an ancient Rome classical, or from ancient Rome classical literature. The third satire is a verse satire by the Roman satirical poet Juvenal, written around 110 CE or after. The poem is a monologue by a friend of Juvenal called Empressas, who was leaving Rome for a better life in the country, and who lists all the many ways in which Rome has become an unbearable place to live. It is perhaps the single most famous of Juvenal 16's satire. Thus, the first character of the poem is, or his name is, Ampersus, who is about to leave his main city, or his living city is Rome. In the prologue, the poet addresses his audience in the first person, explaining that his friend Ampersus, whom he is meeting for the last time on the edge of the city of Rome, is about to depart from Rome for a better life in the country, a decision of which Juvenal thoroughly approves. The poet then joins the audience as Ampersus, a loyal Roman citizen who can no longer endure his homeland, speaks his mind in an extended monologue. As he sets off for Cumae is the place where Ampersus is going to live. He would like to live to this place, which his name is Cumae. Ampersus relates the reasons he has been deriving from Rome. So he's going to give us some reasons why he would like to leave Rome. That there is no longer any room for honest men. The first one is, there is no longer any room for honest men. Only liars and paupers. That the only way to earn the patronage of a great man is to learn their guilty secrets. So this is in second point. Then that Greeks and Syrian, who are willing to lie and cheat and do whatever it takes, are starting to oustet the native Romans from their jobs. That the only rich men are believed on their oath. So the third point, that the native Romans are out of their jobs. This is one of the most important reasons. And another reason is that the only rich men are believed in oaths. That the poor are rejected. Yani the poor people cannot live in Rome anymore. There are places in the theater that he can never hope to marry an heiress or to receive a legacy. That costs are that the costs are too high in Rome, and the style of living too pretentious. That there is a constant danger from fire of falling houses. That the noisy crowded street makes sleep impossible. That the poor are hustled on the street, means that the poor are not going to get a suitable place for living, for sleeping, while the rich are borne safely through the streets in letters. And that there is a constant danger from items thrown from windows, as well as from roadways, burglars and bandits. So these are some specific reasons why Ampersus is about to leave Rome to settle down or to live in Cumae. Ampersus begs Juvenal to visit him in Cumae whenever he is visiting his native Aquentum, and promises to support him in any attempts at political reform Juvenal might take up. So this is in short the poem, the short summary for the poem of the third satire of Juvenal, and how the main character Empress is about to leave Rome to settle down or to live in Cumae, and he enlisted a specific reasons that derived him to leave his city. So Juvenal is accredited with 16 noun poems divided among 5 books, all in the Roman genre of satire, which at its most basic in the time of the author comprise a wide-ranging discussion of society and social mores, written in dactylic hexameter. Roman verse satire is often called Lucilian satire, after Rasselas, who is usually credited with originating the genre. In a tone and manner ranging from irony to apparent rage, Juvenal criticized the actions and beliefs of many of his contemporaries, providing insight more into value systems and questions of morality, and less into the realities of Roman life. The scenes presented or pictured or painted in this text are very vivid, often lurid, although Juvenal employs outright obscenity less frequently than does material and Catullus. He makes a constant allusion to history and myth as a source of object lessons or exemplars of a particular vices and virtues. These tangential references, coupled with his dense and elliptical Latin, indicate that Juvenal's intended readers was the highly educated subset of the Roman elites, primarily adult male of a more conservative social stance. This is in short about the poems written by Juvenal. Right now moving to the second part, which is the main poem written by Dr. Samuel Johnson, London, a poem in imitation of the third satire of Juvenal. Here is a short introduction of the poem. Early edition of the poem in 1738, the first edition by Richard Dodsley. Dodsley bought the copyright from of the poem from Johnson, and Johnson later remarked to Boswell, "I might perhaps have accepted less, but that Powell Whitehead had a little before got 10 guineas for a poem, and I would not take less than Powell Whitehead." This is, the first edition in 1738. The second revised edition in 1738, in the same year, again by Richard Dodsley, and the folio and octavo, which is 66 lines exported in the Gentleman's Magazine. The third edition, again by Richard Dodsley in 1738 in the folio. The fourth edition, here in the last one, the fourth edition by Richard Dodsley in 1739, again in folio. The revised edition in 1740 In 1748, revised edition in Dodsley's collection of poems, and the last one should be or that have been appeared in the form that we are going to read. So this is in short a very short introduction to the poem and its editions and collections, and who is the famous one that first get the honor to publish and revise this poem. Now I'm moving to the poem itself by reading some lines and stanzas from London, a poem in imitation of the third satire of Juvenal. Though a grief and fondness in my breast rebel, when injured Talus bids the town farewell, yet still my calmer thoughts his choice command. I praise the hermit, but regret the friend, resolved at length from vice and London fair, to breathe in distance filled a rapture air, and fix on Camperia's solitary shore, give to St. David's one true Britain more. For who would leave unprided Hibernian lands, or change the rocks of Scotland for the strand? There no one are swept by sudden fate away, but all whom hunger spares with age decay. Here malice raven accidents can aspire, and now a rabble rage, now a fire. There ambushes her relentless refrain lay, and here the foul attorney prowls for a prey. Here falling houses thunder on your head, and here a female atheist talk you dead. While Thales wait the weary that contain of dissipated wealth the small remain, that on Thames banks in silent thought we stood, where Greenwich smiles upon the silver flood, struck with seat the save or that gave Elizabeth, we kneel and kiss the consecrated earth. In blazing dreams the blissful age renew, and call Britain's glories back to review. Behold her gross triumphants on the main, the guard of commerce and the dread of Spain. Ere masqueraded debauched excesses of breast, or English honor a grow as stands or standing just. A transient calm the happy scenes bestow, and for a moment lull the scenes of woe. At length awaking with contemptuous frown, indignant Thales eyes the neighboring town. So this is in short a short lines of the poem written by Samuel Johnson, which is or named London. Now I'm giving to give you a short summary of this poem written by Dr. Samuel Johnson. London, a poem in imitation by of the third satire of Juvenal, a poem in 27 stanzas. See, 27 stanzas of varying length or lengths, is written in pointed heroic couplet. We have seen that the poem is written in heroic couplets, an imitation of Juvenal's third satire. It revives Juvenal's complaint against flattery, fraud, perjury, theft, and rejection of old Roman virtues, and applies them to the British metropolis. Like Juvenal, Samuel Johnson is rhetorical and dramatic. He presents reader with a scene. The scene is a man injured by the viciousness and follies of the city, leaving for the peace and solitudes of the country, is bidding farewell to his friend. Johnson's poem opens with a man, the second point, opens with a man named Thales, waiting on the bank of the Thames for the boats to take him to Wells. So, in the original poem, Empress is about to leave Rome, or he would like to leave, or he is wishing to leave Rome to Camay. And in the imitation or the imitated poem by Samuel Johnson in London, the name of Empress became Thales, and Thales is or would like to leave London, while in the original one, Empress would like to leave Rome. In the original poem, Empress would like to leave to Camay. Here in London, the poem of Samuel Johnson, Thales would like to leave to, or he would like to go to Wells. Thales reviews his reasons for leaving town, as Empress in the original poem enlisted all of the reasons. See, the first one is selfishness, greed, the absence of public and private virtues, and the disappearance of a true patriotism. The greatest effect of these calamities are felt by the young and the talented. Still other evils, such as arson, random violence, and even murders committed by pampered young delinquents and mischievous drinkyard, are directed against the helpless poor or unsuspecting citizen. Thales can say no more because his boat has arrived. Yet he promises to come out of solitude to renew his attack on London's vice when his friend is ready to leave the city. London presents a problem to readers. To whom is Thales addressing a grandiose monologue, which is appropriate for a large audience, merely to the single friend who accompanied him to the boat? It is ironic that the people who need who need his message are not there to hear it. It is also possible that Johnson, to show how deeply his speaker is affected by his ordeal, has him forget that only one person is listening to him. Of course, outside the fictional situation of the poem, Thales has as an audience all the readers of London. So, the third point here, London in part is a public poem, a satire attacking the corrupt, long-entrenched governments of Sir Robert Walpole. A typical Tory complaint repeated several times in the poem parallels Juvenal's laments for the death of old Roman virtue. The speaker expresses anger and disappointment for England's losses, of the fair justice of King Alfred, of the heroism and sanctity of King Edward, of the bravery of King Henry, and of the honor and commercial accidency of Queen Elizabeth. Instead, under Walpole, worth and science are ignored, insulted, attacked, and forced by their enemies to live the capital city of London. This includes abstract representations of evils such as the sable ghoul, the silken courtiers, and the fairy fob. So these are some of the reasons that have been enlisted in the poem. And in the fourth point here, you can see, students, the fourth point, London is also a private. As we have talked about the poem as a public poem, so London is also a private poem, which expresses Johnson's personal sense of injury in the outrage committed by a vicious society on the virtuous individual. It also contains concrete details that tie it to Johnson's own experience. Johnson had seen two of his friends, Henry Hervey and Richard Savage, victimized and forced, like Tallis in the poem, to leave London for Wales. Another point that is very significant here in this poem is the rhetorical structure of London. I mean the poem. The poem's rhetorical structure allows the speaker to turn from observation to questions, to exclamations then, from panoramic descriptions of a society in moral chaos to mock exhortations to villains to do their worst, from condemnations of evil to prayers to be separate. So again, the structure also permits the what we can say here, the expressions of a wide range of strange feeling, and strange feeling just like anger, loss, sorrow, rage, regret, and so on, and allows these feelings to build on an almost unbearable tension. Even so, the reader has an impression that great reservoirs of emotional power are being restrained by an immense effort. Thus, the famous lines in which Johnson describes his own unfortunate condition, slow raise worth by poverty depressed, sound mild and unconscious out of context. Within the poem, they indicate wrath and despair about to explode. These emotions and the themes with which they are associated appear in Johnson's writings mostly. So this is in short the summary of the poem London by Samuel Johnson. Now we are going to discuss different aspects of the poem by itself. So London, as a title, the full title is London, a poem in imitation of the third Juvenal satire of Juvenal, is a long poem of 263 lines. 263 lines written in heroic couplet. See, this is the first point, is a long poem of 263 lines written in heroic couplets. Samuel Johnson's first important writing and his second greatest poem after the Vanity of Human Wishes. This literary imitation of Juvenal satire, the third, is neither a translation nor a paraphrase of the original. Keep your attention, students, that the poem of London by Samuel Johnson is neither a translation nor a paraphrase of the original. It is a genuinely a new and vigorous composition about corrupt 18th century London. Johnson himself wrote in 1738, consisting, this is the quotation, consisting in the adapting juvenile sentiments to modern facts and persons. So he manipulate the poem into a modern fact. So the poem was a direct challenge to Alexander Pope. This is the third point, see here, that the poem was a direct challenge to Alexander Pope, the supreme contemporary imitator of Horace. Horace is a poet of ancient Rome, who supposedly welcomed the publication of London with the prophecy that its anonymous author will soon be deterred. So, or in this case, Johnson's satire against an urban wasteland, did help to unearth him from literary obscurity and appropriately earned the praise of the great poets and the critic T.S. Eliot 2 centuries later. Again, returning back, the poem here in this point opens with an unnamed narrator. See, the poem opens with an unnamed narrator expressing mixed emotions about the pending departure of his friend Tallis from Greenwich, England, by boat to some rural retreat of a primitive innocence in Wales. The narrator may regret losing Tallis to Camberia's solitary shore, but fully sympathizes with his friend's abhorrence of a physical and moral dangerous London. So, from line 35 to the end of the poem, Tallis utters a powerful diatribe against the city, and as Donald Green notes in the Politics of Samuel Johnson in 1990, makes use of all the commonplaces of contemporary opposition propaganda against the administration of the Prime Minister Sir Robert Walpole. Bemoaning a city preoccupied with vice and gain, in which learning goes unrewarded. Tallis prays for his escape to an ethnic happier place, far from benzoid politicians or poisons politicians in the pay of Walpole's regime. So the poem or Tallis, the speaker of this poem, shows us that London is a city preoccupied with vice and gain. This is one of the most important reasons that he focusing on his descriptions of why he is leaving London. Again, Parliament itself is a major wellspring of national corruption, tainting the already poisoned youth of the land, spreading lies as truth, seeking a coward peace with the Spanish murders of England or English trade, who dared to cut off an heir of Captain Robert Jenkins, and enriching itself by controlling the populace through the government newspapers, just like the daily getters and the recent stage licensing act, which was causing liberty-loving English drama to be displaced by depraved Italian opera. So this is, again, he enlisted some reasons of his leaving of the city. And by the way, Thales is the truth-telling good man. Here, see, Thales is the last point. Thales is the truth-telling good man, ver bonus, found in a classical satire, a true blue Protestant Englishman who despises the corrupting invasion of foreigners, especially Slavish Frenchmen who win perfunctory by flattery, deceit, and an unprincipled readiness to do anything for the ruling class. In a money-hungry metropolis of topsy-turvy values, poverty is the only crime that provoke universal ridiculous and neglect, or ridicule and neglect, whereas wealth causes an admiring nation to help rebuild rich Orgilio's mansion gutted by fire. So widespread is urban violence from drunkard, street gangs, and murdering burglar that the amounts of rope needed to hang this growling horde of criminals would use up all the services of him needed to rage the ships for King George II annual visit to his royal mistress in Hamburg, Germany. So Thales, or as a result of this, Thales must bid farewell to London, and he promises that if his narrator friend should ever retire to rural innocence in Kent, then Thales will leave Wales and join him there to help inspire the creation of satires against the vice of the age. So this is, in short, a very short critical summary of the poem London. And now, moving to the other part, which is the fourth part of the lecture, that the forms and the devices used in the poem of London by Samuel Johnson. At the heart of Samuel Johnson's morality artistry is a moral realism that has roots in Juvenal satires the third, but that's influenced by a Christian Renaissance visions of right and reasonable conduct. It bears a comparison with other 18th century works like Shakespeare satire, William Hogarth, Brent's, Henry Fielding's novels, and so on, claiming later to have had all 16 of Juvenal's satire stored and poetically transformed in his mind. Johnson's may well have composed London rapidly, most in his head before he committed to verses to paper. So the poem was his first major bid for literary fame. It is much more of a poetical transformation. See, the poem is a poetical transformation of Juvenalian satire. This is the second point of this page of the slate. See, it is more of a poetical transformation of the Juvenalian satire than some previous commentators have recognized. The changes are an early indication of Johnson's the distinctive's moral vision and poetic voice. For example, in keeping with his Christian sense of moral decorum, he deleted Juvenalian reference to sexual debauchery, homosexuality, slobs, peasants, and wayward gods, and substitute sanitized generalization and reverential references to a kind heaven protecting poor mortals. Even more, we can say here that even more original was Johnson's creation of a political poem, repleted with stock opposition, propaganda, and allusion to a glorious libertarian past from a Latin satire relatively silent about Roman politics. See in this that the poem is filled with opposition for propaganda and allusion to a glorious libertarian past. This is in the third point. Again, it is filled with a Latin, or it is a kind of returning back to allusion to glorious libertarian past from a Latin satire, which is important here. Despite a considerable restrictions on the 18th century press, Johnson enjoyed more freedom of political expressions than Juvenal could assume under an imperial dictatorship. Even though Johnson acknowledged the irrelevance of his adaptation, definitely in lines 182 to 109 of Juvenalian verse, or rebuilding burnt mansions to English manners, the rest of London, or the rest of the poem, was of immediate topical relevance to the current political scene and to his own bitter sense of being an outcast in the city. And finally, we can see here that Johnson's poem is far more compressed, here in this point, number 5, more compressed, more elegant, and more aphoristic than those of Juvenal. The angry but casual satirist of Rome, London is almost 60 lines shorter than Satire the Third of Juvenal, not only because of Johnson's omission of Juvenalian digression and an entire section on a crowded Rome street, but also because of his remarkable rhetorical conscience, which engenders summary moral generalization. Thus, a single pithy and beautifully illustrated line, which is, "And very moment leave my little less," condense almost two felicite lines of Latin verse, literally translated as "My means are less today than they were yesterday, and tomorrow will rub off something from that remain." Young Samuel Johnson in London proved himself a master of the closed pentameter couplet. See the last point of this page, the closed pentameter couplet here, you can note So Samuel Johnson in London proved himself as a master of a closed pentameter couplet, better known as the hero couplet, that John Dryden had refined and Bob perfected. In Johnson's hand, the closed couplet lines were at the magnificent surface of his insistent search for moral order and rational control, in a poem describing urban anarchy in vivid details and striking generalization that sometimes border on allegorical abstractions. The intellectual dynasty of some of his compressed lines can surpass the virtuoso poetic wit of even Pope. And here we can say that the symmetry, balance, antithesis, and paradox provide a rhetorical harmony of the discordant subject matter. Here, like in "Here malice, rapine, accidents conspire, and now a rival rage, now a fire." This is in short about the form and devices used in the poem of Samuel Johnson's London. Now, moving to some interesting, or one of the interesting subject this in the discussion of this poem is the theme or the themes that are discussed by Samuel Johnson in his poem. So, discussing the theme or talking about the themes here in the poem, Johnson or Samuel Johnson deliberately he chooses two of the important themes, or two major themes. They are the youth and corruption, as well as the poverty. So, discussing the themes. Now, London is an idealistic outsider view of England, deprived capital city, or deprived capital city, summed up in the poem of Juvenalian epigraph. The theme of an idealistic or innocent youth exposure to a corrupt city in a journey to or from the country surfaces in Johnson's fiction, or already existed in most of Samuel Johnson's fiction, just like in his most prominent writing, Rasselas, in 1759, and in the works of fellow 18th century Englishmen like William Hogarth, an engraving of the 1730s of a rakes or harlot's progress in ruin, and in Henry Fielding's great novels Tom Jones in 1749. The theme has a classical roots in a Greco-Roman mythos of poetic escape to Bacchic simplicity, but also registers the genuinely bittersweet reaction of the contemporary authors, so often born in the province, to the stunning realities of fast-growing and fast-paced London, or fast-paced London. Despite that Johnson later became famous for his love of London, his early poem strikes a note of revulsions. A 30 years old a newcomer to the city, born and reared in the provincial town of Lichfield, he surely felt neglected and endured poverty as a journalist editor for Edward Cave's The Gentleman's magazines. Fame and fortune must have seemed elusive to him as he struggled in the callous and cowarded center of a British culture, crime, commerce, and council of state. Even though he interlarded his satire with stock opposition propaganda against Walpole's regime, he also gives vent to heartfelt abhorrence of urban excesses and a grinding poverty. Part of the poem's bitterness stems from the encouragement of his natural rebelliousnness by his friendship with the charismatic and unstable minor poet Richard Savage, who is sometimes perhaps equated with Tallis. Savage too was an erudite, hypersensitive, and poverty-stricken author who, like Tallis, had to escape to Wales, and who, unlike Johnson, died in 1743 without achieving enduring fame and fortune in the big city. So, allied with the central theme of exposing the moral and physical horror of the modern metropolis through ridicule for the readers, satiric instructions are two motives of escape. The first one is the classical myth of rural retirements. So here we are moving directly to the meaning of the poem, or the some meanings that co-allied with the themes to represent the society of London as well as the political situation. So among these meanings that helps the reader to understand the situation is the classical myth of rural retirements from the city, adapted from Juvenal satire III, to embrace British geography, including remote places such as Wales, Scotland, Ireland, Kent, and the bank of the rivers Severn and Trent. There is even a probable allusion to the new pauper colony of Georgia. This is definitely happens in lines 170 to 175, founded by James Aglothrope in the early 1730s as a philanthropic and religious orientation settlements in North America. So the poem's geographical escapism again extended to escapism in time. This is another meaning in the poems that helps the reader to understand the themes of the poems, is the meaning of escapism in time. Juvenal fleeting hints of an ancient golden age are nothing compared to Johnson's insistent and periodic appeals to visions of former English greatness, as foil to the stark national decline visible everywhere in the city. So, we can say that radically innovations from Juvenal's original hints, Johnson created a new, more political poem of opposition propaganda that contrasts Robert Walpole's supposedly crowdly policies toward Spain and France during a looming war of Jenkins era against the Spanish in 1739 with the greatness of Queen Elizabeth I, and this happens in line, definitely in line 19 to line 30, يعني من 19 إلى 30, and references to Edward III in lines 99 to line 105 من 99 إلى 105, and Henry V in lines 117 to 122, يعني من 117 إلى 122, and Alfred the Great in lines 248 to 153 من 248 إلى 253. Indeed, Thales' very retirement to Wales is a reaction of the flight of ancient Celtic Britons from foreign Saxon invaders, and we can find it in line 7 to line 8, in line 43 to 48, definitely. The pursuit and deprivation of English liberty and Christian rectitude require an escape from the economics, enslavism, and ethical chaos generated in the capital city of London. So this is in short about the poetry of Samuel Johnson, Dr. Samuel Johnson, the life of Samuel Johnson, as well as his famous poem which is written or entitled London. Thus we can say for the students, thank you for listening, thank you for apprehending the meaning, and for taking your time. So if you have any question, anything you would like to understand, be courage and do not hesitate. Just deliver your question. Thank you.